Hey everyone, welcome back to Beat the Sheet, an Xbox Game Pass challenge. The only podcast aiming to complete every single one of the now over 400 titles that have been made available on Xbox Game Pass since the start of 2020. As always, I'm your host Andy Wood, and I'm joined by my co-host Josh.
Hello, hello.
Alright, so on this week's show, we review the first ever Xbox Series exclusive title, The Medium, only 3 months after the console comes out. The Yakuza continue their takeover of Xbox Game Pass, and we try our very best to make sense of the Balan Wonderworld demo.
God help us.
We'll try, but I'm not convinced we'll succeed. So how are you doing this week, Josh?
You know, I'm doing okay. I've been having some spooky late nights playing that Medium since, it's the big new launch of this week. I kind of had a bit of a horror double bill last night. I played through the Medium and I watched a movie called The Invisible Man, starring Elizabeth Moss. It's real good. Check out that movie. Fantastic movie. But the side effect of that was that I have a Woody doll from the Toy Story movies. I love Toy Story. I love Woody. I've got my own Woody doll. And he started, he's getting a bit weird. His battery's going a bit. So sometimes he just talks apropos of nothing. And it's a little creepy. But when you've been playing the Medium and the Invisible, and you've just watched the Invisible Man, so you're slightly on edge, and you get yourself into bed, and it's 1:30 in the morning, and all of a sudden you can just hear from just at the corner of your ear, you're stirred from your slumber by, "There's a snake in my boot." "Howdy, partner. My name's Woody." And he was doing this for hours, to the point where I had to physically take his batteries out to shut him up. And I'm now currently trying to work out if there's a way I can sneak them back in without my girlfriend's knowing, so I can skirt the living heck out of her when this fits to life apropos of nothing. So yeah, I've had some spooky shenanigans with my Woody doll this week.
Fantastic stuff. I actually had a similar thing to that years ago now, but somebody bought me I can't remember why, but someone bought me like a bananas in pajamas teddy that had a voice thing in it for like a really bad present once. And it just sat in a cupboard for literally I hadn't seen it in like over a year. It just sat in this cupboard, never heard a peep out of it. And then I was asleep. Well, I was either asleep or heading to sleep one night. And it just suddenly just went, it's have fun with Teddy time. And I was like, it's fucking not. It's not at all. Jesus, what's this? So, yeah, I've been in that hell. I understand exactly what you've gone through there. Oh,
yeah,
wow.
Spooky dolls, man. You don't need that. But how's your week been, irrespective of that memory being dredged up for you now?
Yeah, I mean, didn't enjoy that coming back, but my week's been fine. It's been a busy week of Beat the Sheet content this week. We've had a ton of games to finish up before the 29th when the games were leaving, and then they didn't leave, but that's a topic for later on. So yeah, I managed to get back onto Final Fantasy 15 a bit this week to wrap up some of those DLC episodes. They made some DLC with the members of the boy band that aren't Noctis. So I went through those, and those were good fun. They were good times. They didn't necessarily get reviewed very well at the time, but I think that's just because, I don't know. I guess you review these things differently when you have to buy them separately. But they came with my version of the game, so each one was about an hour and a half long, and I enjoyed them all. The Ignis one was absolutely insane. That if anyone was just going to play one of them and they like Final Fantasy 15, play the Ignis one. It's crazy. It has this insane alternate ending that just rewrites what happens in the rest of the game. It's nonsense. But yeah, so I had fun with those. I had to rush them in time, but and then didn't. But nonetheless, yeah, good stuff.
Good times. Well, shall we move on to the show? We got plenty to cover. Okay, so depending how you count them, there have been 3 new additions to the Xbox Game Pass service this week, and they are Cyber Shadow, the Yakuza Remastered Collection, which contains Yakuza 3 Remastered, Yakuza 4 Remastered, and Yakuza 5 Remastered. And finally, the big one of the week, the first series exclusive, The Medium, has dropped. Now, we did expect to see Project Winter, but that's been moved back a week. That's going to be coming this week. Apparently, the devs needed a little bit more time to tidy it up. So, yeah, always support that. Always support pushing games back to get them right. But what do you make of this lineup?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is a good week for a lot of people. The Medium, as you said, first ever series exclusive. A lot of people have been excited for that one, been waiting for it. So that's good. And then also, people are relentless about asking for more Yakuza all the time. So getting 3 of them at once should hopefully satisfy people for now until we get Yakuza 6 in just a couple of months' time as well. So yeah, good week. And then Cyber Shadow as well is, it's a cool little indie kind of throwback, retro throwback, I should say, published by Yacht Club Games, who make Shovel Knight. And it's there's just a lot of stuff here for different types of people, I think, which is, that makes a good week.
Yeah, I'd say this is about as good of a week on Game Pass I've seen in a while. I like the sound of all these games. You know my love of the Yakuza series, so fantastic that we're pretty much there. We are just a game away from the mainline Kiryu saga being on Game Pass. How fantastic is that? And yet, Cyber Shadow, if you're into those old school kind of remixed NES games, then yeah, that's a good time too. And the Medium, me like you, the Medium, but we'll get onto that later. So we haven't finished Cyber Shadow, but we've both played a bit of it. So why don't you kind of like kick us off and talk us through some of your thoughts on this old school NES style rip-off, essentially, of Ninja Gaiden?
Yeah, well, yeah, as you said, this is basically a 8-bit ninja action game, so very Ninja Gaiden. It does that thing you see a lot these days where 8-bit, like things that 8-bit versions of games these days aren't necessarily constrained by the same restrictions as games that were actually made in the 80s. So, this looks like an 8-bit game, but also it has things in it that you would never get in those games. For example, there's like a weapon that spins around you and it follows your momentum. So you can like run back and forth or jump up and down. It'll be like whipping around, hitting everything. And, stuff like that just wouldn't have been feasible back then. So, it does some good stuff like that. And I really like this game. I mean, I'm not very good at it, which is a problem because it's insanely difficult. And I'm now kind of at the point where I've got a bit of a dilemma where, I've made it almost halfway through. And really, I should try and push through to the end now because picking it up down the line to try and beat it is going to be a disaster. I should use the skills I've learned now to finish it. But also, I'm just getting my ass handed to me basically because, it's a retro throwback ninja action game in that it's insanely difficult. That's what these games were like back then. It's what they are now. And yeah, I mean, it's a good time. I think if you're a fan of these kind of games, you're going to love this. There's very little wrong with it. I think, I don't have any faults to pick of it other than the fact that I'm not very good at it. And that's my fault really. So yeah, I'm definitely a fan, but I'm struggling with it.
Oh yeah, I can't make any progress in this game. This is proper difficult. I was struggling on the first level. So, the minute I finished like the second, I was like, okay, barring me just devoting my week to Cyber Shadow to get it completed, it's probably best if I just leave this for leaving soon, and I'll leave it for when I need to hammer my head against the wall then. But it's kind of reminiscent of its publisher's game. It's published by Yacht Club Games, who of course made the fantastic Shovel Knight series with its wonderful DLC episodes and everything that encompasses that. So I'm not too surprised that they saw something they liked in this because it kind of apes a similar format. It's very revitalism. It's taking on those old tropes of the series and what games were like in those days, and it does it pretty well. I mean, the music is on point, fantastic chiptunes. The graphics themselves are pretty much as you'd want them to be. Everything looks suitably good. The story is delivered in the most drip-feedy kind of way possible. I love that as well. There's a lot to like here. There's a lot for people who enjoy these old school kind of games to drop back into. Unfortunately for me, I've never been a particularly good hardcore gamer. I'm not great at video games. I'm pretty bad at them. I'll openly admit it. And I hate just losing because I just lose my rag like a little toddler. I have no tolerance for frustration. And I could feel my anger rising in like 2 levels of Cyber Shadow. So it's probably best I stay away from it for the good of my health for a little bit.
Yeah, that seems fair. I mean, as I said, I've managed to get through I think I'm through 5 levels now, and I think there's 11 in total. So I'm making progress. And yeah, as I said, what's there is great. This is a really tight and responsive game. It feels nicer to play than any 8-bit game is going to arguably at this point. It's got some awesome kind of chiptune, style, retro style music as well, which is great. And they actually do a really, I think they do a really good job with their checkpoints in this game because there's almost like weird Dark Souls elements to the way they handle checkpoints in that it's like, you'll get a checkpoint, which means, you'll come back there when you die. And also if you want to, you can spend some points to like make that checkpoint give you power-ups, which is nice. But what they do is you kind of proceed further in the level And then when you get to when you get past an area you're in now, you'll find a way to make a shortcut back to that checkpoint. So, you might get through a really difficult area and then kick a ladder down that goes back to that checkpoint. So when you die in future, you go back to that checkpoint, but now you can just instantly get back to where you were last. So I quite like that. That's kind of a design element that, you wouldn't have seen in these games back in the 80s. So good to see some stuff kind of, seeping in from modern gaming there. And yeah, as I said, the game is it's really good stuff. I probably imagine I'd be giving this a 7 or maybe even an 8 in the end. I just think, I wouldn't want to fault it for the fact that I suck at it. So I think it does everything right in terms of being a retro action platformer.
Yeah, I agree with you in the way they use their checkpoints. It's really clever. It's really useful. I like the fact you can buy upgrades and skills at checkpoints as well using the coins you've collected. But it's kind of like a game of risk reward. If you use it too early, you're not going to have enough coins to use it for the boss fight. So it's always a case of balancing when you're going to actually spend to, maybe get through the tricky section you get into, or do you just keep hammering away at it because the boss could be even harder? I like that. That's risk reward played in a pretty satisfying way. And the fact that you refill your health when you get to checkpoints as well is a godsend. I'm glad they're not like you scrape there with 1 bar of HP and then they just force you to try and do it on that. So it's kinda a lot kinder than the 80s NES games are. So I imagine if you're into them and you've got the time to put into learning its systems, you could get a lot of fun out of this. I'd aim towards a 7, but I've played so little to really score it. But I think this is a good time. It's a game. If I wasn't doing this challenge, I may actually continue playing. Okay, and our next edition is the Yakuza Remastered Collection. Now, anybody who is a long-time listener to this show knows how much I adore the Yakuza series. It's my greatest find of the last console generation. I, like many others, started with Yakuza 0 and I've just been devouring these games ever since. And although I've not completed all of the remastered collection, I do have it on my PlayStation. I tend to kind of save a Yakuza game at this point for Christmas. I see it as like a Christmas treat to myself. I play one a year and I'm slowly but surely catching up. So of this trilogy, I have played Yakuza 3. So I can give us a little bit of thoughts on what the remastering is like and what you can kind of expect from these games in comparison to, say, what you got with Yakuza Kiwami 1 and 2, which were very much ground-up remakes. When they call these remasters, they mean remasters. These are not ground-up remakes. So, Yakuza 3, PS3 title, and you can tell. Like, there has been no work done to, bring this up to the standards of PS4. It is very much a give it a HD sheen, play it in 1080p, get it at 60 FPS, and just go, that's probably enough. And in many ways, it is enough. These games don't look terrible. Any game from this sort of era doesn't look awful. You can kind of get used to it. It's not going to jar you too much. The only thing you'll massively notice is the animations are a lot stiffer. The combat moves and doing beatdowns don't feel quite as satisfying as they do in Kiwami 1 and 2, and of course 0, which are built on the new engine. But the story of Yakuza 3 is kind of hard to go into too much detail if you've not played the 3 games which precede it.
Yeah.
But I will say it's probably the first instance of Kiryu being properly out of the Yakuza lifestyle. Like, he was fully out. He's not like toe half in, half out as he kind of was in 1 and 2. This game, you start, you're out, you run in an orphanage of all things, and I love that. And naturally, things happen which drag you back into a mob saga of epic proportions, as is always the case with Yakuza games.
Yakuza 3 does sound great, and obviously, as you said, one of the big hurdles here is just the fact that you kind of do need to play 3 whole games before you get to it. So I mean, the main concern I have really, and you kind of touched on it a bit already, but like, how jarring is it to go from full-on remakes to suddenly being back at a PS3 era title? Like, in terms of the gameplay, does it feel obviously dated, or is it aged quite well?
That's the thing about the Yakuza series. It kind of came born fully formed. The core was always there. It's just been iterated upon. So there's elements of frustration in that the skill trees aren't as satisfying as they are in later games. You can't switch combat styles like you can in 0, which is a big shame because it is fun to switch it about and do things in a different way. So it's a lot more streamlined, a lot more basic. But the core act of punching thugs in the face remains just gloriously fun. You know, that will just never change. So although it's jarring to an extent, I don't think anyone's going to be unable to play this sort of game. I'd say the biggest problem people will have with Yakuza 3 is everybody blocks in this game. Like, the blocking in this is a nightmare. Like, in 0, 1, and 2, yeah, people will block and you'll have to find a way to work around their defenses. But in this one, they will literally hold their arms up for the entire fight and you will chip away at even the most gruntiest of grunts' health, because they just will not drop a guard at any point, no matter what you do. So, and a lot of fans have complained about this. Yakuza 3 is the most tiresome in its combat because of that. Fights do have a habit of dragging on a bit. Though the converse is that, you know, people do love those big Yakuza boss fights, and these just go on longer and longer, and it's much more attritional. And it's kind of fun that you're just chipping away and you can never not have a sushi set on hand to stuff down your face, which is always my healing item of choice in the Yakuza series. I never buy the drinks. I only buy sushi sets because I find something inherently hilarious about Kiryu shoving a bunch of California rolls down his throat in the middle of a fight and then completely healing himself. I love that.
Nice. No, it does sound good. I mean, Yakuza is a series it's constantly on my list. Game Pass might force my hand pretty soon because I've put about 10 hours into Yakuza 0 now, and I do really like it, but it's just becoming an increasingly more time-consuming undertaking now to really, you know, to power through all these titles. So yeah, I'm looking forward to get around to it at some point eventually, but obviously got a lot of Yakuza to get to before I get to these remasters. So yeah, what did you end up scoring Yakuza 3 then in the end?
I scored Yakuza 3 an 8. No game in this series. I would be amazed if any game in this series scored less than an 8 for me. All the things I love about it are still here. Loads of side missions, fantastic cast of characters. One of the best mob friends you will ever get is in this game. So much fun. As good as Majima, who's not in this one as much. Of course, he turns up. It's Majima. He's always there. Sub-stories are great. Fantastic side content, as you'd expect. 2 full locations to explore, Kamurocho and Okinawa, which is more like a seaside resort town where traffic is constantly running you over, and it's fantastic. So that's great too.
Nice.
Yakuza 3, it's a real good game. It's got a real good story, as you'd expect, same as ever. Nothing's really wrong here. They still manage that ridiculous balance of comical side stories and really hard-hitting, heavy drama, which somehow should never mix and should never work, and yet it does, and it's some form of sick magic that it does. I still don't understand it to this day. And I'll quickly say for Yakuza 4 and 5, 3 was the last time you only played as Kiryu. So obviously in 0 you play as Majima, but that came much later. 1 and 2 was Kiryu only. 3 is Kiryu only. 4 and 5 are much grander kind of stories. In 4 you play as 4 different characters. I think you play as 4 as well in 5. So it's a lot more giant swirling story of a game. So this is the last kind of full-bodied Kiryu tale. So there's joys to be had in that before Yakuza 6 turns up in Game Pass in 2 months, which of course closes off its story. A lot of Yakuza to play. Get on it now, though, because it's just the best series in Game Pass. It's just a treat to play. Okay, so let's move on to the main event. We've got an Xbox Series exclusive in January, 3 months pretty much after the console launched. And it's from Bloober Team, of course, developers of Blair Witch, Observer, Layers of Fear. They did some other crap as well, I'm sure. Bloober Team are one of those developers where I've always had a bit of a bone to pick with them because they're so close to putting something great together, and they've always kind of fell, ironically, into the medium. So, does the medium buck that trend for you?
I mean, I think the medium's a really interesting game, and I also think it's going to end up being very, very divisive. I think you're going to get people who love this, and you're going to get people who are frankly bored to tears by it. And I fall closer to the side of really liking it. And I didn't expect to either, because I played the start of this game, and obviously, as you said, this is it's a spooky horror game. It's kind of an atmospheric horror game. It's relatively slow paced, and you spend a lot of time in this game basically just exploring your surroundings, solving simple puzzles. These, they're not meant to be massively taxing. This isn't a puzzle game. And yeah, you solve these puzzles and you kind of just soak in the atmosphere of this like really creepy, abandoned former kind of Polish hotel resort place where a big disaster's happened, and you're trying to figure out why. You're trying to figure out why you've been sent there as well. And yeah, I really ended up getting quite into the kind of atmosphere and the feel of this game. And I don't usually like games where you walk around slowly and solve simple puzzles. That's airing dangerously close to a point and click, and I hate point and click games. Whereas in this game, I genuinely like. I think the best part of this game by a distance are the parts where it's reasonably relaxed and you're just exploring and solving simple puzzles. I think this game actually falters when it tries to get more intense than that, which is strange because initially, for half an hour in, I was thinking, oh, this, I want this to be more actiony and more intense. Whereas it's kind of the opposite once I was done with it.
Yeah, I mean, to answer my own question, I do think this is Bloober Team's best work. I think they've finally pulled a lot of what makes their games interesting into something which is genuinely quite fun to play. The medium, for anybody who has played Observer, is very similar to Observer in how you go about playing this game. Almost down to the fact that you'll hack into people at times to wander through their subconscious. The medium does this as well. Yeah. It probably does it better, if I'm honest with you. So there's a lot of similarities with that game, but I think the storytelling here is much tighter, much more controlled, much more certain of itself than it was in Observer, which was at times almost just a Blade Runner pastiche to the point of literally casting an actor from Blade Runner to be the lead actor. But just to speak about some of the things I like about this, mainly the first thing that caught my mind, and it's so different to what you get nowadays, is those fixed camera positions that the medium uses. You have no control over your camera in this game. It's very old school. It's kind of reminiscent of like a Resident Evil or a Silent Hill game, probably even closer to, in that you're constantly being forced to walk into places where you don't know what's through the door because you can't position the camera to see it. It's always a leap of faith. Occasionally, the camera will be front and center at the lead character's face, and you can't see what you're walking into. And the game does a lot of good work, just building up tension. Very rarely going for jump scares, just tension that you don't know what's going to be around that corner. You can't control what's going to be around that corner. And I find that quite interesting. It's very cinematic. Games often talk about being cinematic, but I think the art design of the medium is fascinating. It puts its camera in such interesting positions, not just in its gameplay, but in its cutscenes as well, where the much ballyhooed feature that the world splits into two and that you'll control both at the same time, even at times extends to the cutscenes. So you'll see one thing from the spirit world's angle and the other thing from the real world's angle. And it's all very interesting. It's quite dynamic. And I didn't expect that from it. It makes it interesting to look at. Even if you're just walking down a corridor, I'm looking at things in an interesting angle. And I love that about it.
Yeah, I agree. I think I went into this and, as well as obviously, as I said, the kind of adventure gamey point and click tropes. Another thing that initially concerned me was, you get real early Resident Evil Silent Hill vibes from the camera and also the way you move around. It's not quite the tank controls of original Resident Evil. So, don't be too scared off by that. But it's not a million miles away. The moving around can feel like it's going to be a bit too cumbersome originally, but realistically, I settled into it after about 20 minutes. I didn't have a massive amount of trouble controlling this game, with the rare exception of there's a couple of sections where you end up doing a bit of a chase scene, and the camera cuts in that have a habit of sometimes doing that annoying thing where suddenly you're running into a wall because the camera's changed direction. And, it doesn't happen often, but when it does, that can be quite frustrating. But yeah, as you said, I mean, just walking around this world and the way that they use the split to kind of show you two completely different interpretations of the exact same space is actually really clever. And I think that the split mechanic of having these two worlds is it's at its best from mainly just kind of a visual and atmospheric standpoint. Like there's some interesting puzzles that use it, and they do often try and use it for puzzle reasons, but the puzzles are fairly straightforward. It's like I enjoyed the split mechanic mainly just to have two views of this exact same location and just kind of, I don't know, it just really brings you into this world quite well.
I love the split screen mechanic in this. People speak about next generation experiences, and this is one. You couldn't do this on Xbox One. You can't play it on Xbox One. This is only available on Xbox Series and the PC because you need those fast SSD cards to really render these two worlds at the same time and to have them running alongside each other And it's quite exciting. The first time it happens is really cool because I've not really seen anything like that before. Games don't really do this very often. And you mentioned the visual design of the worlds, and it is fantastic. You know, the game takes place in an old workers' resort in Poland. That's a wonderful setting for a video game because even the notion of having these massive hotels where people go on holiday because you can't go anywhere else, such was the rules of the time. It's foreign to this country, but it's so ubiquitously Polish. This game is so Polish, developed by a Polish team, and you feel every sense of that within it. Despite the fact it's all in English, it feels authentically European, and I love that about it. So you have these old dilapidated communist kind of buildings from that time frame. And the spirit world itself is just disgusting. It's just covered in limbs and dirt and sand, and it's usually in like an orange sepia tone, where to get through doors, you'll literally have to cut through skin with a knife. And it's disgusting and it's horrible, but it's that dichotomy between the two. You never quite know where to put your eyes. You want to soak up all of it. You want to take your time in it. I read a lot of reviews saying that Marianne, who's the lead protagonist, moves quite cumbersomely, but I didn't mind that because I didn't want to rush through these environments. I wanted to soak them in. I wanted to, get that sensation and that eeriness from these places they created. It deserves that. Don't press the run button in this game if you can help it. Just walk around, soak it in. There's so much to be enjoyed from a visual standpoint. It really does well with that. On the flip side, could it do more with the puzzles with this mechanic? Yeah, it could do a lot more with the puzzles. On the whole, it's pretty simple. There's nothing hugely taxing here. I mean, I hear I'm going to be playing a puzzle game one day after launch, and there's not going to be many guides up, and I'm getting a bit feverish and a bit hivey, thinking, oh God, I'm going to get stuck in a room for 2 hours. And even me, with my simple, tiny mind, was able to walk on through the medium pretty simply without too many problems. But that's not necessarily a bad thing. I don't mind puzzles which have a logical consistency. There's now wrong with logical consistency. You should be able to look at something and go, oh, actually, I guess it would be this, rather than some point and click nonsense where you need to go get the cat and rub its asshole against the light switch 10 times or something like that to actually get some progress, And I'm sure you kind of feel the same on that.
Yeah, of course I do. I mean, that's why I hate point and click games, because they're just full of nonsense that makes no sense, and then it's kind of smushed together into a solution. Whereas, this game doesn't do that. It keeps it simple. I mean, most of the puzzles, to be honest, boil down to the Marianne that's in the kind of world of the dead. She can gain some sort of power and then use it to charge things up, so she can almost infuse electricity into the world of the living. So, the vast majority of puzzles, frankly, are just using that to power up things for Marianne in the living world to use, and that's fine. It's they do different spins on it. There'll be times where you have to do this. They call it an out of body experience, but there'll be a wall in the way of living world Marianne, so you need to almost shut her down so that you're just the other Marianne and you can go through and explore more and stuff. And it's all pretty simple. You'll know all the mechanics in this game within about the first hour easily, and you'll just use those to get through the whole game. But I'm fine with that. They clearly weren't trying to make a taxing puzzle game. They were trying to make a kind of atmospheric story piece, and I think they've succeeded at that.
Yeah, we should probably talk about the story a little bit here, because it's a fairly simple tale. You play as Marianne, who is a spirit medium. Foster father, her adopted father as such, has recently passed away. She puts him to rest. She gets a phone call saying that somebody can tell her about her past and who she is if she turns up to this workers' resort and looks for this dude. She turns up, it's dilapidated, it's haunted as heck, there's weird children about, and there's mysteries afoot. It's a fairly simple tale. Yeah. It's a genre piece. It's very tropey. It follows what you'd expect from these sort of titles, what you'd expect from a movie in this genre, a book or a game or a novel. All of it is tied in to what you'd expect. It's not doing anything radically clever, but I don't think it necessarily has to. Do people look at horror films and it has to be an It Follows or a Get Out every single time? No, you can have fun just doing something by the book, by the numbers. That's okay. The medium is by the numbers, but it's consistent in its storytelling. And moreover, it has some wonderful voice acting, which really brings the world to life. The lead actors in this are fantastic. Troy Baker being the big name, who voices the evil spirit who is haunting you throughout this game, a la like a Mr. X. And his voice is terrifying, man. It just screeches through you. He's just screamed about how he wants to wear your skin. It's just, puts the willies up you.
Yeah, I was going to say as well. I mean, the script overall in this game is great, but particularly the writing for that monster is just it's just disgusting, isn't it? It's just so like it's so creepy and horrible. And as you said, it's just going around talking about wanting to like try you on and wear you out, and it's horrendous, and that's great because that's what it should be. It's really really well done.
And of course, the monster who is haunting you is where most of the horror kind of mechanics of the game come through. And I'm similar to you. I'm not a massive fan of these. At times in the game, you'll have to employ stealth mechanics, very similar to Observer, but Observers were god awful, and these are at least manageable, where you'll just have to hide out of sight of the guy, dart past him, go into the next room. It's not particularly difficult. In fact, I only got caught once, and that's because I didn't instantly figure out what the puzzle was. The minute I figured that out, I was fine. So it's not hard. It's not tough stealth, but they kind of break up the pace a little bit. I kind of don't want to be doing them. I kind of want to just be looking at postcards and reading about what this resort was and what all these freaks were getting up to. And there's some people you learn the backstories of who have tragic pasts and lead to tragic events in the future. There's a secret police dude who's a total ass. And I love the fact they have that. I love the fact they have the old workers' police hanging around. Very cool. But those kind of mechanics don't do much for me. And there's elements of combat as well. We have to do perfect parries of these tentacles which will attack you. And you'd have to be asleep to die at those. You literally have to fallen asleep to die of anything in this
Even
game.
then, I think you might have a chance. Like, I think you'd manage. I mean, I guess to the game's defense, like, that's the only thing that constitutes combat in this game, right? It's just an occasional parry of some tentacles or holding a button in so some weird moths don't eat you. Like, that's the whole combat. And that's fine because they didn't want, they weren't making an action game. But yeah, it's set up to be as simple to manage as possible. You're not going to exactly get any. It's not going to be enthralling to play, to battle through the tentacles. That's for sure.
You're not there. You're here for the story. You're here for the world. You're here for everything that encompasses it. And if it grips you, and it certainly gripped me, I pretty much beat this in a day. I couldn't put this game down. I was loving it. It was so old-fashioned in so many ways that it scratched a little itch for me, which I don't really get anymore. I guess we should speak about it as whether this is a powerhouse for new consoles. Does it demonstrate what these things can do? Certainly for me, I thought the game looked good, but there were times where technically it got a little choppy. The frame rate at times wasn't even hitting 30 for me. It was probably dropping to 20. And that's a little frustrating. But I thought on the whole, it actually is quite a decent showcase for what these consoles can do.
Yeah, so now I guess we should explain, Nick, you're playing this on the Series S, of course. I'm on the Series X. Like, I didn't get any frame drops on the Series X. It was all steady and consistent. But I would say that for a game that, as we said, it's the first ever exclusive for these consoles, it does look pretty muddy in places. It's from an artistic standpoint, it's designed beautifully, but this isn't a game filled with the highest quality textures in the world and the most amazing kind of character like assets in the world. It's not. It's because at the end of the day, this isn't a AAA studio. They don't have a gigantic budget, but what's there looks good enough. I would say they do a great job with lighting effects. There's a particular scene where you're outside in a storm and the kind of like the lightning and the way the light shines off stuff there, like that does look high end. That looks really, really special. But beyond that, this isn't it's not a visual kind of tour de force. It's just, it's a nice enough looking game that has this split worlds mechanic. That's the next gen element here, really.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I'd also say perhaps the facial animations are a little bit naff. This is where you can see the budget of the studio, because it's a real shame because the voice acting's so good. I kind of wish the motion capture on the face was doing it justice. At times, nothing's really happening up there, and there's a lot of emotive dialogue happening, and you're thinking, bloody hell, we're really showing the budget here. But, that's one of those things that's going to happen. But on the whole, the game plays solidly enough. It never became a frame rate disaster on the Series S, I should say. At times, it got a bit choppy. On the whole, it was okay. It held a firm 30 FPS most of the way through the experience. I've just become obsessed with 60. Now that I've got these next-gen consoles and I've been playing things at 60 FPS, I can't go back, Andrew. I'm ruined. It's crippled me. I've become like a PC gamer. I can't help myself.
I do get it. I mean, cause I've got my Series X, and I got like a really nice kind of 4K TV at the end of last year. And then any game that gives me the option of like, you get like Final Fantasy 15, for example, it gave you the option of, do you want to push to 4K and play at 30 frames a second, or do you want to play this light mode, which is more like standard HD, but it's 60. And I'm pressing that every time. Like, sod the 4K TV. I just need that smooth frame rate. Like, I shouldn't have even bothered buying it. I just want to play 60 frames. But yeah, and like I said, this game runs well enough on the Series X, but this isn't a 60 frames a second game even on that. So if that's something that's a real selling point for you, you're not necessarily going to be getting them frames from the medium right now.
I suppose, kind of wrapping up my thoughts on it, I liked this game. I enjoyed what it did. Is it, as a horror game, is it massively scary? Probably not. It's kind of more tense and spooky than scary, apart from one very early jump scare, which made me nearly crap myself. It came so far out of nowhere. I practically threw the controller at the wall. It got me that bad. But other than that, it's never that bad. The character's a little spooky, dialogue's a little spooky. But if you're not a horror fan, you can play the medium, and I don't think you're going to be having sleepless nights unless your Woody doll's going off, just trying to scare the living heck out of you for no apparent reason. But I like this game. I like the story. I like the gameplay. It's very linear. I like linear games. Those who don't may be annoyed by the fact that there's boxes everywhere railroading you down the one path you need to go. I'm used to it. I've been playing games for 25 years. It's just what it is to me. I like that sort of gameplay. But others may find it a bit limited, and some may find the story a little bit rote. But for me, I didn't have too many problems with this. This is Bloober Team's best work yet. I'd happily play a sequel to this, and I'd give it an 8 out of 10.
Yeah, I mean, I don't sit too far away from you on this one, to be honest. As I said, I think this game, when you're just exploring this creepy workers resort and solving simple puzzles, I think it's fantastic. I was fully gripped for all that time. I think the game falters a bit during the stealth sections, and also during there's a few chase sections where, you're running towards the camera and you're getting chased, and those can be a bit clumsy, but realistically, there's only a couple of them in the game. You'll be done with them within a few minutes, so you can get through them. I'd argue as well that I think you touched on it a bit earlier. There's these segments that are like what they do in Observer, where you kind of go into people's minds and figure out, what makes them tick and what's going on with them and stuff. And I actually think they also took me a bit out of I just want to explore the creepy workers resort for slightly too long for me. I think they stretched on to be very lengthy, and there was a couple of them near the end that kind of made up the brunt of the kind of back part of the game. And I would have probably trimmed those in half as well. So yeah, for me, I've ended up giving this a 7 out of 10. I think if it would have been more explore the creepy workers resort with Marianne, I'd be at an 8 for sure. But there's just a few little bits where I don't think the pacing quite worked.
Yeah, no, that seems fair enough to me. Definitely one. It's a great Game Pass title, this. This is a Game Pass title and a half. If it's part of a subscription, it's well worth a play. 6 to 7 hours, give it a go. I think we'd both say give it a go. It's well worth a play.
Completely agree with that, definitely.
If you can get an Xbox Series console, that is. Well, good luck with that.
We shouldn't lord our consoles over the listeners, Josh. Come on.
Damn it. Okay, and moving on to our leaving soon / kind of probably left already games of the week. Yeah. So this is kind of awkward for us because Microsoft did say that on the 29th of January, we would be losing the batch which we mentioned last week, which was Indivisible, Final Fantasy 15, Fishing World Sim Back from the Dead, Death Squad, and the other one, Sea Salt. So they've all gone, and they probably are gone now. But we are going to touch on Indivisible because we didn't review it last week, and we've both been barging through it, trying to get it played by the 29th, only to find out we could have had 2 more days of it. But we don't know what's coming up next. We don't know what will be leaving soon. It'll be announced on probably by Tuesday. I'd say that's usually when they announce the new games coming to the service. We'll probably find out what's leaving as well. But it's a bit frustrating, this, isn't it, really?
Yeah, it's a little frustrating. I mean, this is episode 35 of the show now, and we've never had a case where, we've never had a situation where we've had this happen twice in a row, where we've not had the Leaving Soon titles ready for the next, the next show kind of thing. I think this only happened once in the history of the show as well before now. So it's just a bit frustrating that we're kind of stuck waiting to see what waiting to see what we're going to have to throw our lives into for the next 14 days, basically. But yeah, as you said, we battled through these games in time for what was meant to be a Friday the 29th deadline. And clearly that deadline didn't really exist. So that was also nice. Thanks for that, Game Pass. But yeah, all pretty frustrating. But as you said, we didn't get a chance to review Indivisible last week. So definitely worth giving it a quick review, I think, for people who might be considering buying it maybe now, because it will almost certainly have left by the time the show goes up.
Yes, so Indivisible. Let's speak about this title. This is possibly the strangest game for me because it started off as an almost certain 8 or 9 out of 10 in my mind. I was enjoying the first 6 hours of this game so much. I was so invested in what it was doing. And yet it's managed to plummet its way down by the time that the game finished. It has horrific pacing and gameplay issues, which just bad design decisions, which just really hold this game down. But I suppose we'll just give a quick overview of what it actually is. So it's a 2D side-scroller. It's essentially a platform RPG game. It's a JRPG of style, but developed by a Western studio. So it's got a lot of those Japanese elements to it, but it's been westernized in the ways you'd expect. And you essentially play as a young woman named Ajna, whose dad has been killed by this evil dude called Ravanavar, and you want to go get your revenge on him. The hook being that the person who killed your dad is now literally a member of your party because he's been absorbed into your head, and that you can't get rid of him. Fantastic setup for a game, may I just say. What a wonderful place to kick off a story. What a great conflict to start something off on.
Yeah, I agree with that completely. And I think, that's one element of this game, as uneven as it is, that does hold pretty strong through the whole experience. I think, they have got the kind of structure of a really good, fun narrative here. And it's quite original. It's quite unique. I don't feel like I've played this game before. And that also extends into the characters as well. I think that there's a huge variety of characters. They're all well written and fun to talk to. And, all of that side of this game it stays pretty high end for the whole experience. It's just let down by everything else, basically.
Yeah, it's frustrating. And I want to talk about the dialogue because Indivisible is one of the best written games I've played in a long time. And I say this strictly from a dialogue point of view because the story itself, I don't massively care for. I actually think the story is a bit boring, a bit rote, and it repeats itself endlessly en route to its conclusion. But the characters themselves are brilliant. There's a woman in this called Razmi who you quickly adopt into your party about 10 minutes in. And she's this miserable, sullen woman. You can't even discern her age. She's almost ageless. She could be 70, she could be 20. You can't tell. She's so beaten down and miserable. And all she wants to do is set things on fire. And she'll repeatedly tell you that. And that sounds kind of, terrible nerd gamer humor. But this game never does that. It never falls into that trap. Yeah. It is legitimately funny. And I can't believe that the guy who you to absorb into your mind, Dar. And all you ever do with this guy is just tell him to shut up because he's a murderer and he's an arsehole. And he's completely convinced that he was doing the right thing because that was his lord and he was going to save the universe. And of course, his story, as he gradually realizes that just maybe he wasn't on the right side of history there, is really well written as well. But there's so many good characters just dotted about this game with fun dialogue, and they pop up and they say something funny and they go away, and they're all inside a head, which means they can pop out at any moment to say something witty and clever. And I love that about this game. Usually in a game like this, I'm starting to get tempted to skip dialogue after a few hours because, it's a bit tedious. It's poorly written. I didn't skip a single dialogue box in Indivisible. It's so well written on that point of view, at least for me.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with that. As soon as we started talking characters, because I'd forgot the names, I was trying to do like a sneaky Google to remember Razmi's name because she's one of my favorite characters in this game easily. She's the perfect kind of miserable. It's just every line just lands from her. It's not, as you said, it's not that kind of. I don't know. It's weird because all she does want to do is set things on fire, and yet every line she says does feel unique. Like it's not like she's boring or it's not like they're repeating dialogue she's already said earlier. It's always something different. But it's just again, the characters are fantastically well written, and there's a huge variety of them as well, and that also extends to the combat system because all these people that end up in your head, for the most part, about 95% of them are people you can then use to fight with. So as well as them having this great dialogue, they also all come with their own kind of completely unique combat moves and fighting styles. And that's another aspect of this game that I actually think does a pretty great job for most of the game. You know, like you put a party together of 4 of these people, and by the end of the game, you've probably had about 20 different characters, and you can mix and match them and do whatever you want. And they're all just completely different. I mean, I found one near the end that was basically a team of like some kind of footballer men, and they just kick a ball at someone repeatedly, and you have to time it right to keep hitting the ball at them, which, like I said last week, it's that kind of Mario RPG stuff where you have to time the buttons perfectly to get the attacks right and stuff. And I love that. And it's such a strange game to talk about because, you know, we're kind of sat here for the first few minutes of this review gushing about how good this game is. But this isn't a good game. It's not a good game at all. Like that's what's so jarring here.
It's frustrating. And so I'll just mention a little bit about the combat because I too love the combat in this game. You mentioned Mario and Luigi RPGs. It is very similar to that. Each character is mapped to a button. So say you map someone to the top of the controller, there'll be the Y button, the X button, the B button. You just have to press that to attack and you press that to dodge conversely as well so that you can block with those buttons and you attack with those buttons. It's really simple, but it's quite deep and there's quite a lot you could do with it. And there's different styles you can mix in to build combos and to, you know, increase your damage that you're doing. And it's super fun to play through. All the way through, I enjoy the combat. I would say some of the enemies have a little too much health. Yeah. And it can take a bit of time to grind them down because once you've got a hand of this, once you're getting quite good at blocking, you're not going to take a lot of damage. And so it's just the slow drip feed of damage to kill somebody. And that after 18 hours, and this is a big old game for an indie kind of studio, starts to wear a little bit thin. But it's credit to it that 18 hours, I was not dreading battles after 18 hours. I was still enjoying them enough. There was still enough here in the combat system, at least, to keep me occupied. The problem is, as this game opens up, it kind of switches from being a linear 2D game where you get ferried around different locales to explore, gain party members, and move the story along. It suddenly stops doing that and says you're going to have to start going back to explore because, surprise, this game is a Metroidvania, and disappointingly, it isn't a very good one.
Yeah. I would have to say this is probably... I mean, I'm sure it's not the worst Metroidvania, but it's the weakest Metroidvania I've managed to make my way through. You know, I don't think there's anything satisfying about traversing these areas. Like in the first third of the game where we both loved the whole game, it was like you said, it was super linear. You just went pretty much from left to right, jumped up some simple platforms and progressed the story along, did some fights. And then suddenly you're asked to kind of go back and forth through these 3 big areas, which all, like, each individual area has its own design, but then room to room, once you're in that area, everything just looks so samey. There's just no real standout features. There's nothing interesting to really look at as you get from point to point. And also the kind of traversal in this game, it's good enough for a linear kind of walk around and do some RPG combat game, but it's not good enough for a Metroidvania. You know, this isn't tight, satisfying platforming. You know, it's not up to that standard. So when the game suddenly decides it's going to be a Metroidvania where you have to explore everywhere and get new powers and bash through new areas, it completely falls flat. Like I was just consistently bored for the entire second third of the game, the second act of the game, I would say, which is just all backtracking. I didn't have any fun during that part at all.
It's so frustrating to play through, isn't it? Because as you mentioned, it is all of a sudden you are going back through these environments and these areas, but it's just not very satisfying to explore. You do gain new powers. I mean, I know you have a massive bugbear about how you gain powers in this game because it is ridiculous. You gain powers less by like discovering a power up or, you know, beating some boss or anything like that. You just literally get to an obstacle and then she remembers how you can do it. Or one of your party members goes, oh, you know what? I can actually help you with this. Despite the fact you've walked through about 20 of this exact same obstacle en route to this one and they've not had a peep out of them. And then you've suddenly got the power and you can do it. And that is so unsatisfying because it means that when you are traversing the map, you find all these places you can't get to. And it just becomes frustrating that you know that you're only going to get it at some predetermined point at a random time through no real skill of your own. It's just going to appear from nowhere. And it just kills the joy of exploring this world, hurt doubly so by the fact that the map is terrible in this game. It shows you a tiny little square of where you are, rather than just showing you the full map so you can move around and see what's missing, because that's the joy of a Metroid game. You want to be able to know where you are, because if these environments kind of become a bit samey, it's easy to get lost. It's easy to not really know where you are. And all of a sudden, the thought of exploring just dies a death, because you might not be able to get back to where the heck you found yourself at. Because I wouldn't know. At times, I'd go off to try and find a little Rinlet, which is their power-up source in this game. And I'd not be able to get back to where I was for 15 minutes because I'm just lost. I'm just tied in this maze. And it's just deeply unsatisfying to exploring.
No, definitely agree. And they also have the problem as well that the map it's not detailed enough. So you'll have situations where you'll look at the overall map and let's say, for example, I've finished up in a certain area and I just want to get back to my stupid boat because there's no fast travel, which I'm not saying Metroidvanias have to have fast travel, but this game kind of had to have fast travel. I've plotted a course on the map to get back there. And then I'll go like 60, 70% of the way there and realize that even though the map looks like I can traverse through this next bit, it turns out there's actually a wall that's currently too high for the skills I have right now. And there's no platforms to hop up to get up to that level. So I just have to turn back and find a different way. And there's no way for me to see that on the map in this game. And, when you're already a bit bored of traveling around this world, when things like that happen, it's an absolute killer. So yeah, just nothing at all good to say about the second act of this game.
Yeah, it kind of also changes from a fun combat game into a slightly frustrating platform game the further on in this game you go. Yeah. And I don't hate it because I find the platforming serviceable, but I don't really find it hugely satisfying. I find at times there's a power example to slam your axe into the wall so you can get a bit higher up. And that is so hit and miss at times as to when it's actually going to work. There's a power where you can put flowers on spikes, and occasionally it'll work, and sometimes it just doesn't. And there's no real rhyme or reason to it. You just kind of get stuck with it. And there's times that it starts to link all these things together, and it just becomes a bit of a slog. It becomes a bit of a frustration. I'm pretty okay at platform games, so I didn't really get stuck on it. But I imagine if you're not good at them, some of these sections are really going to cause you some grief and aggro, because some of them are really tricky for what the combat system, what the platforming actually allows you to do. It's just a little bit iffy. It's a little bit stiff. It's not fluid enough for what it's kind of asking you to do.
Yeah, well, that's it, isn't it? I mean, I already said that, I don't think this platforming is fit for purpose as a Metroidvania. So if it's not fit for that, it's definitely not fit for suddenly becoming a reasonably difficult platforming game at the end of the game. Like it just doesn't work. Like you can do it. Like, you have a fairly limited set of moves and skills to use. So, you can utilize them to get through this random decision to suddenly be a platform game at the end of the game, but there's no enjoyment to be found in it, and I love a good platformer, but you're not gonna have any fun like going through difficult platforming with the style of game this is. It doesn't fit. It should have just been a simple, run from left to right, jump up some simple platforms and do some RPG combat game, which it was in the first 6 hours. If it would have remained being that, I would have loved this game. But instead, the second act went on this weird Metroidvania direction. The third act went to platforming almost. And none of those decisions worked at all. And they ended up just completely souring me on this game.
And it's just the story as well. I mentioned at the top, this kind of ends up repeating itself, and it does. It forces you into the same emotional climax time and time and time again. It's not ever badly written. That's the thing I want to stress about this. The writing is fine. The actual moment-to-moment dialogue is okay. But the story, what's been crafted for the writer to work within, I just don't think it's particularly strong. It's a fairly rote tale of girl has to come of age to defeat the demons inside her and eventually save the world. Fair enough, but does that really support an 18-hour campaign of just a lot of backtracking and a lot of similar environments? The game, as you mentioned, takes you to these 3 big environments. You do something in them, and then an event happens. You have to go back to them again and traverse them all over again. And it's like, I've done all this. The joy of a Metroidvania is that you can skip half of it. Like you can just go up this pipe now, and then you're to a new area almost instantly. Indivisible doesn't do a lot of that. It does a lot of, oh, you can go all the way where you were, but now at the very end of it, there's a new pipe you can go up, and it just keeps going. And it's just like, oh god, I've only got a fast travel. It's just a frustrating mess the further on it goes. And great writing, gorgeous visuals, and a solid combat system does enough to keep me invested. But I was really begging this game to end by the time you get to its hugely frustrating and disappointing final boss fight.
Yes.
Yeah. Which is just an absolute arse of you have to die 20 times to learn the pattern, and then it's a piece of cake, but you have to just keep doing it until you finally get there.
Yeah, well, again, they make the same mistake. They make like a smaller version of the same mistake they make for the entire last 15 hours, which is they just randomly off the cuff decide to make it kind of a different game again. Like the last boss in this game doesn't play like the other boss fights in this game. It doesn't really use the combat system properly, and you haven't had any practice at doing that because it wasn't in the rest of the game. And yeah, it's a mistake they make over and over again, and it's a real shame. I don't necessarily know what happened to this game. I don't know if it was rushed. I don't know if they initially planned to have more areas in the game maybe, and then they had to like smush their plans into these 3 areas that you go to over and over again. Like I'm just not sure. But whatever it is, it's a real shame because they had something really promising at the start, and they kind of threw it away by the end.
And you'd say that, well, this is a learning curve for the studio, but the studio itself has been mired in just nonsense and controversy, mainly by its owner and lead designer, who by all accounts is a total asshole.
Yeah.
And has shut the studio down because plenty of people called him an asshole. And so we'll never see what could come from Lab Zero Games, despite the fact that there's huge potential here. And there's clearly a lot of very talented people working at that studio, because there's a lot of good elements here. This is the frustrating thing about this. There's so many good elements, and it's just been overtaken by just bad decisions.
Yeah, I mean, that's it, and these guys clearly, they've got good writers. They know how to craft a good combat system. They definitely know how to animate a combat system. Some of the combat animations are beautiful. So there's so much talent there. But I guess maybe that's what you can see in this game. You can see mistakes and hostility from, the top level people at the company, which has kind of filtered into the game and kind of, poisoned it a bit, really. Because, yeah, it's just the talent at the studio has not matched up to the result that's come out here. So yeah, it's a real shame. I mean, I'm sure they'll all hopefully find a ton of success elsewhere, because it's a real shame what happened to this studio. I know that the staff actually offered to basically just buy out the owner of this company and continue running it, and he was a stubborn enough dick that he said no and just shut the whole place instead. So that's nice. But yeah, look, as I said, really talented people working here. I hope they get to make some more great stuff in the future. I'm sure they can. But this one didn't work for me at all. I've ended up giving this a 5 out of 10, which is a real shame, real disappointment for me.
Yeah, I ended up giving this 6. And like I said, this was scoring high in my mind for those first 6 hours. So it really plummeted in my estimations. There's enough here I enjoy to still make it a trepidatious recommendation. But would I spend money on this? I'd probably recommend you shouldn't. I dare say you should have played it in Game Pass.
Yeah, sadly, yeah.
Sorry about this 15-minute waste of your time.
Yeah, if this 15-minute waste of your life has bothered you, maybe at Xbox Game Pass and tell them to start giving us the Leaving Soon games at the right time. But yeah, that's all we can offer you this week.
Okay, and here we are with the return of our oft-repeating segment, What Are We Playing? But we've given it a rebrand in lieu of my recent declaration that I plan to be all of EA Play. This week it's called, What Are We EA Playing? That's a pun right there for you.
We're so smart.
We're so clever. Andy has clearly seen my challenges, has decided he wants a bit of that abject misery in his life, because you two seem to have embraced the EA Play challenge within the Game Pass challenge, because we can't challenge ourselves enough in our lives. And so, obviously, with EA Play's giant back catalogue of exciting titles, you've got the Dead Space games, you've got Mirror's Edge, you've got Shadows of the Damned. So naturally, we've both played Zuma and Zuma's Revenge this past week or so.
Yep.
One of which was the first ever game on Xbox Live Arcade. and the other is just the sequel to it. So shall we kick off with the original Zuma, Zuma OG, which came out God knows when, 2006 or something like that.
So I went back into original Zuma to finish it up for the sheet this week, and I have unlocked like achievements in Zuma from 2005. So there's a 16-year gap between the achievements I unlocked then and now, which is just, if you want to feel old, that'll do it. It's just, crazy. This was basically an Xbox Live Arcade launch title. Before this, it's kind of hard to even think back to that now, but before this, you just got fully fledged massive retail games. There wasn't little arcade experiences that made it to games consoles. It was a new thing, and you can bloody tell it was a new thing because original Zuma is a relic at this point. This thing is hilariously old. It has to be said. To quickly go over what Zuma is, this is a PopCap game. So PopCap are the creators of a lot of very fantastically made casual games. They made the Plants vs. Zombies series. Their highlight for me is Peggle. I think Peggle is genius.
Love Peggle.
They make the Bejeweled games. It's kind of that hyper casual type of sort of game anyone can play and enjoy. And they became masters at that over maybe the last 10 years. Zuma was made 15 years ago. They weren't masters at it yet. So this is basically a game where you're a little totem thing and you shoot colored balls at a bunch of other colored balls that are going past, and you have to make sets of 3 of them to make them pop. And that's the whole game. You just have to try and pop them all before they go into this tunnel, and then you lose. So that's all you're doing in both of these games. But in Zuma 1, you're doing that with a limited amount of lives, and there's a ton of levels to get through. And if you lose your lives, you have to go back to the start of it, because this is a real arcade throwback. And I don't like that. I wish it wasn't that, because that makes it hellish to go back to. As does the fact that this game isn't even in widescreen. it's just shaped for square-shaped TVs, which is insane. I mean, I don't know, like an Xbox 360 on a square-shaped TV just feels like a foreign concept to me at this point. But this is there'll just be a border around that. The whole game takes place in a square. There's one song in the whole game because Xbox Live Arcade games had a limit of 50 megabytes in file size originally, because they had to make sure that people, could quickly get them with old ass internet speeds, or, the internet speed Josh has now. This is just, as I said, it's a product of its time. It's an absolute relic. It's not bad to play as long as you haven't pressed on Zuma's Revenge, the sequel. If this is your first time coming into Zuma, it'll look old, but the gameplay's fine. But there's absolutely no reason to play original Zuma now, unless you're idiots like us who need to complete it for the sheet.
Yeah, original Zuma, when it popped up in that 4:3 aspect ratio, I literally checked my TV to make sure I hadn't made a mistake. I just didn't believe it was going to be played in 4:3. It's not that old. Why is it in 4:3? It's 2006.
Yeah, I don't know.
What is going on? It just boggles my mind. Well, the problem with Zuma on the Xbox 360 is it was quite clearly not made for the Xbox 360. This is a PC game, and all of PopCap's games pretty much started on PC, where you would literally click the mouse where you wanted the marble to go. Trying to do that on an analog stick, which has not been optimized to be, forgiving enough to, allow the fact that it's not a mouse, is an exercise in such anger and frustration. I can't even begin to tell you how annoying it is when you think you've lined up a shot perfectly and it somehow just misses. And then the entire thing is ruined because it's rock hard and it refuses to let you miss one little shot the further on in this game you go.
Yeah.
Oh, and then the music just loops and loops in your head and it never stops. And you just want to throttle whoever is nearest to you because it's so annoying. Oh, Zuma OG is... I put down Zuma OG after the first world. I just went, okay, let's see what Zuma's Revenge is like, because I physically thought, they can't both be like this. They can't... How did this get a sequel? I mean, surely something improved. And Zuma's Revenge is better. Let's be pretty clear about that. Zuma's Revenge feels like a PopCap game. I like PopCap games. They're colorful, they're friendly, they're inviting to play. They have a lot of nice...
They're in widescreen.
They're in widescreen. There's more than one song. There's all sorts of things you can like about them. And Zuma's Revenge actually makes this formula quite fun. Matching 3 is a lot more enjoyable in this game than it was in Zuma OG, which is just hell. Zuma's Revenge, you don't have a death and start at the beginning again like you do in Zuma. In Zuma, you can complete 17 levels of Zuma, lose one, and then you're right back to the start of the world again. And you just cry into your pillow. Zuma's Revenge, you just take it level by level. If you die, you die. Don't worry about it. It's a PopCap game. We don't hate you like the old PopCap did. The old PopCap was made of bad people. New PopCap is friendly and the frog is well animated. So you can tell it's a frog and not a totem pole, which you couldn't really tell before.
Yeah.
You know?
And the analog stick works, which is nice.
The analog
stick
works.
That definitely helps. But yeah, that's the thing. Yeah, Zuma's Revenge is a fun time. It's not PopCap's, it's not the peak of PopCap. They've made more addictive games, but it takes the basic idea of Zuma and just adds enough flair to it to make it fun. There's a ton of fun power-ups in Zuma's Revenge. You can get like bombs to just blow up a huge section of these balls, or you can get a lightning bolt that gets rid of all of a certain color. There's even boss fights in this one where you have to like make a hole in the row so you can like shoot up at the boss and knock him out and stuff. And yeah, it just does a good job of kind of taking the Zuma concept to its limit, really. I don't think there's any more you can do with it, really. And yeah, it's enjoyable enough. I think Zuma's Revenge is the kind of game that's good to have on your hard drive to just pop on and do a level or two every now and then. As you said, there's no kind of stakes to this. You don't run out of lives and need to start again. So you can literally just load it up, do the next level, which will take between 1 and 3 minutes at most. And then, turn it back off or do a couple more until you want to do something else. It's a good little pick up and play game.
And it's got boss battles as well, which I think is pretty cool. And the boss battles are quite clever. Like, they're well designed and they've got little different ways of going about it. And there's levels where you'll jump between lilies to fire your marbles elsewhere and slide on a little pole. None of this was in Zuma OG. I mean, they didn't have the file size for it. I'm amazed it even has anything in it, let alone, that actual game. So Zuma's Revenge is actually pretty fun. I kind of liked my time with it. Enough to inspire me. If you are to play Zuma OG, play Revenge first. Gain some muscle memory. Then you have to immediately start playing Zuma.
Yeah.
Because it's the only way you'll be able to do it. You need to have that instant kind of connection to Zuma. You can't start from scratch. You'll never get the hang of it. If you go in with a little bit of experience, you can probably beat your way through most of the game. And no one's beating Zuma OG. Not without a mouse. It's just not possible. It's physically not possible. It's broken.
That's entirely fair. And I do think as well that one of the main joys I got out of Zuma this time, because I hadn't played it in, again, 15 years, one of the biggest joys I got out of it was finishing Zuma's Revenge. And then within like literally 5 seconds, I quit out of that game and I loaded up Zuma. And it's like you've just gone into some nightmare dream sequence. Like, because it's the same game, but it's not the same game. And it's now in 4/3 and it looks awful. And it's a weird experience to go from the newer one to that absolute relic of the past. It's worth experiencing for only that and then turn it back off. But I ended up giving the original Zuma a 4 out of 10. I don't think you should play it. It's even like we said, there's problems with this even at the time, like them not optimizing the controls, but now it's even worse. And then I gave Zuma's Revenge a 6 out of 10. I think it's good fun sort of game that's fun to just pop on for 10 minutes at a time.
Yeah, I gave OG Zuma a 4, Zuma's Revenge a 6. I pretty much give all PopCap games a 6, apart from Peggle. Peggle gets an 8 out of 10, and Peggle gets an 8 because when you hit that last bar and Beethoven's Ode to Joy starts playing, and you jump out of your sofa, you flash, you fucking take your pants off, you start playing your ass around, you're that happy, you're so pumped for the fact you hit it.
That's the level of happiness Peggle gives
you. I mean, I could get like the final kill in a Call of Duty game and feel nothing. But when I hit that last peg, when I had one ball left on Peggle, I literally feel like God. Yeah, that is what Peggle does for you.
That's very fair. Peggle's the kind of game you'll take your pants off for. Zuma's Revenge, you'll maybe take a sock off at best if you can be bothered.
You'll take your pants off sadly. Because you've hit such a slump in your life that the concept of wearing trousers has just evaded you. The minute you see that 4:3 ratio, I just took my belt off and put them down.
Just took your belt off and just hummed the 20 seconds of music that's in the game. And that was just that was your life from then on. All right, then. So let's wrap up the show with a bit of news. And we got a few stories this week. Let's open it up with we've got a new milestone for Game Pass subscribers. There's apparently now 18 million of us at this point. So, really, we should have 18 million listeners to the show, Josh, and we just don't. I don't know what's going wrong.
I don't know. What are you people doing? Why aren't you telling all your friends? Why don't we have 18 million listeners right now? I don't know what more I can do.
Tell them we talk about Zuma here.
I played Zuma, for God's sake, for you people. And I don't have 18 million followers.
If all of you can tell at least 10,000 people that we talk about Zuma this week, just get them in. Like, there's 18 million of you out there. Come on.
And it's an incredible milestone. And
yeah, it
really
is. Yeah.
18 million people. Apparently, we're getting like 1 million new subs each month at this point. That's incredible. This service just grows and grows and grows to the point where that whole Xbox Live Gold debacle, I still don't quite know why they did it. This spin's chugging along so well, so impressively. Just let it keep doing its spin. They're going to hit 30 at this rate. It's quite incredible.
Yeah, exactly. That's the main thing that came out to me on this as well, which is that it makes last week's decision with the Live Gold thing, where they doubled the price and then panicked and reversed it, even more confusing. Because if you're getting 1 million new subscribers every month, why are you even toying with the idea of negative PR from upping the price of a different service? It just seems insane. It just, really weird decision. But obviously, Game Pass is still going strong, and by the looks of it, as you said, it's just going to keep growing and growing. Definitely, I think as Microsoft's first party lineup starts to really come in, and we get Bethesda titles straight into Game Pass over the next couple of years, that number's going to hit some heights, I think.
Oh God, that first Elder Scrolls game that drops in, people are going to lose their minds when that game's there to actually play. People are just going to go bonko nuts for the Elder Scrolls 6. Or probably like 100 million of us plugging into. Apart from me, I won't be playing it.
No, sure.
I won't belittle myself with that trash, but everybody else, I'm sure, will thoroughly have a good time.
Maybe by then you will have actually played, Elder Scrolls Oblivion or Skyrim, and you'll be in Oblivion as everyone plays Elder Scrolls 6. You're like, I guess this is fine. I don't know.
They'll have probably added Morrowind by then, and I'll be playing through that instead.
That's fair. I hope they do add Morrowind. That'd be good fun. But anyway, as I said, big number for Game Pass. It's obviously going really well. So yeah, good stuff. We made a good decision making a Game Pass show and not a PlayStation Now show. So.
Oh, God help us, a Nintendo Switch Online show. Could you imagine?
This week we've got Super Dodgeball on the SNES. I don't think that would work very well. But anyway, so moving on from Game Pass then, we have, this is barely even a news story, it's just more impressions, but we had to talk about it. So this week there's a demo for Balan Wonderworld out, which is the 3D platformer being made by the original creator of Sonic, and he's teamed up with the game director for the Knights series, which was also on the old Sega consoles. So two prolific creators of some of the biggest series in gaming, particularly with Sonic, of course. And you'd think this is obviously going to be a big, fantastic game that's definitely going to succeed, wouldn't you, Josh? That's what you'd think.
I'll qualify that by saying this is Yuji Naka, the creator of Sonic the Hedgehog. But even I, the Yuji Naka fanboy that I am, kind of knew this was going to suck. I didn't think it would be as terrible as this demo is. And yet, I still find myself almost certainly going to buy it. I practically pre-ordered it. The minute I put down my controller, went, well, that was terrible, and just dropped 50 quid on it on Amazon. I didn't even think. I just did it. It's just what I did, because this game is weird as heck.
It's absolutely nuts. I can't remember the last time I played something where I was constantly just bemused by what I was experiencing. I just didn't know what the hell this was. And I love 3D platformers. They're probably my favorite genre of game. So it takes some effort for me to think, I'm going to struggle with this one. But my God, am I going to struggle with this one when I also definitely buy it for £50 on day one? It's just absolutely insane. I guess let's start with just the open. Let's start with the opening level in the demo, right? So this is a 3D platformer. It apes a lot from Mario Odyssey in a way. In this game, you collect costumes, and when you've got the costumes on, you can do special abilities, which is exactly like throwing a cap on people in Mario Odyssey. Now, what's different about this game is you go into a world and it's barren except for all the things that are in the world are just dancing all the time. There's just some wolf people dancing and some rabbit people dancing, and then you get a suit of them, but it doesn't transform you into one of them. You're literally just wearing a costume, and you can still see your own face in there. The first levels are set roughly in a kind of farm setting. And sometimes there's this farmer man in the levels, and sometimes he's your size, and sometimes he's 10 times bigger. And he's just sat there doing nothing. And then when you get near him, he disappears for no reason. And he's not dancing, it's only the other people dancing. And I feel like I'm mentally ill talking about what this game is. I just don't know what I'm even saying. It's insane. It's an absolutely mad game.
It's made even more hilarious by the terrible draw distance. I mean, I can't quite believe this is a game made in 2021 because you won't even see little coins or little diamonds, as it is in this game, on the ground unless you're a meter away from them. And as you approach the diamonds, nothing's there. Dancing bunnies everywhere. And it's really strange. It's quite throwing. I mean, you play as a young person who seems to be having a tough time being rich, and they go to this theater, and this character called Balan, who's just knights, but in a different suit. Essentially, he's just
like knights combined with Cappy, right? He's pretty much just he's got a hat with eye holes in where his eyes are, and then he's just knights. Yeah,
and he creates these fantastical stories. I mean, the first one being about a farmer facing a hurricane. At least I think that's what it's about. And maybe. You go through these worlds, and there was 3 enemies in the entire first world. Nothing was ever there. It was just bizarre. As you said, the main thing you see is dancing critters, just dancing the place up. The platforming is terrible. The jumps feel awful. The suits themselves are a nightmare to switch in and out of because it takes an age. There's just a little animation where you change in and out of them, and it takes forever to do it. And if you get hit, you can't find the sodden suit anywhere. So then you have to go all the way back to the start of the level to get the suit back for whatever reason.
Well, if that as well, I had times on this where I got hit and I lost the suit, and then the suit wasn't where I got it from anymore. And I had to get over a little gap that you needed this like hoppy suit to do. So I had to just eventually manage to do a pixel perfect jump with the wolf costume to get over that gap because the other suit was gone. And then so this game does that Mario Odyssey thing where, to get to certain power moons, or in this case, statues of the Balan man, the cap guy, you have to use certain suits. But if you get hit once, you might lose that suit and then you don't have it anymore. So it's like, I can't get that right now unless I backtrack or restart the level. That's such a bad design practice. It's baffling to me. It really is. And it shouldn't be because, 3D Sonic, I love 3D Sonic games, but they have been the most up and down. Nothing has had ups and downs like Sonic 3D games. It's like GameStop on the stock market. You don't know what it's going to be each time. It could be $1, it could be $300. Nobody knows. It's just a mess. And that's what this is. This is absolutely a mess.
It's just weird, isn't it? I mean, it's not just the fact that you need the powers to get to these statues. Sometimes I swear you need a suit from a different level.
Yeah, you do.
To be able to get some of these things. And there's no indication of that. You kind of just have to know. You kind of have to have an innate feeling of what suits you're going to need to get this weird statue, which doesn't seem to do anything. Sometimes you'll run into the freak, and all of a sudden you're flying around doing these weird levels where you have to stop motion pause and press a button, and then and it does nothing. Nothing seems to happen. All you seem to do is get more money for what is essentially your chow garden. But they're very cute. But...
So to make that worse, and again, just more. Well, I've got a comment on both of the things you just said that are awful. So the first one is, you do need other costumes in the earlier levels that you don't even have yet. And as far as I can tell, the solution to that is you need to go to other levels and then bank those costumes there in this weird little costume changing thing, and then go back to the first level, put that costume on, and then hope you don't get hit, because if you do, you'll lose the costume and have to go back to the other levels to get them again. So that's awful. And then the second thing is the thing you just mentioned there, where there's these weird challenges where you turn into Balan and you have to basically do quick time events and press the button as he attacks to do to succeed in whatever thing. So those apparently, if you do them perfectly, you get one of the statues, which, again, statues in this game are like power stars in Mario. You're trying to get them all. So you have to do that perfectly to get the star or the statue. But I played 4 levels in this game. There's 4 levels in the demo, and they're from different worlds in the game. That challenge is identical in all 4 of them. It's the same cutscene with the same button inputs at the same time. So in every level, you do the exact same QuickTime event game to get a statue. And it's like, who decided to put that in? Who thought, like, do we really want people to have to do this exact same thing about 50 times in the whole game, or however many times? I don't know how many levels there is in this game, but it's just, it's insane. Just insane bad design decisions all over the place. And it doesn't feel good to move and jump around it either. Let's get that straight out there. This doesn't feel it's not a satisfying platforming game either.
No, the camera's terrible. The camera's all over the place. I was like, you just knew it would be. You knew the camera wouldn't be particularly satisfying. It isn't. The character design of the main protagonist is really dull. It's just a dude. It's just some girl. I just played as a girl and it was fine, but it's not particularly interesting. And yeah, I mean, you get 4 levels on offer here. 2 from the first world and a boss fight, and then 1 from the 4th world and 1 from the 6th world. God knows how many worlds there'll eventually be. Nobody really knows. But none of them were particularly challenging. I mean, I just breezed through all of them. There was no particular difficulty there. It was just riddled with bad design decisions, pretty bland level design, just this confusing waviness, which just constantly happens on the screen, which kind of made me feel sick.
I think
multiple times.
What they were trying to do there, from what I can tell, I think, like in Mario Galaxy, a very good 3D platformer, where like you jump onto things that are like planet shaped and you can run around them in a circle. Like the levels in this are almost like they want to be that, but it's dreadful. It's like because you'll walk to the sides and platforms will sort of like rise up into view and then lower back down as you walk away, and it's like you're kind of on a planet shaped area, but you're not on one. It's just this weird visual effect that's really unsettling as you walk around.
It's just totally bizarre. Like I said, the first level is about a farmer and a hurricane is approaching him and his entire field is wiped out, but 1 corn plant survives and he's really happy about that. So you start doing a song and dance number about how happy you are that the corn is here. And it's kind of
he's
fantastic.
Screwed, right? Like he's lost
everything. He's ruined. He's lost everything, but he's got this 1 corn plant.
I mean, I'll add to the fact as well that the first world in this game, right? So the first like 2 levels and then the boss, it's all set on a farm. It's all bright and colorful. Everyone's dancing for some reason. There's this chirpy little musical tune, which, as far as I can tell, is the only music in the game. It's like Zuma all over again. So it's all, nice, chirpy, happy farm times. The level is called The Man Who Rages Against the Storm. It's like, and I was thinking like, it's big business now, business is kicking up. We're going to be some action in here. And then there's just a giant farmer man sat there looking at you, and there's just this little plinky plonk music that's all happy. And I just like, this doesn't fit at all. Like, what's going on?
It is absolutely baffling. It's terrible. It's really unenjoyable. I'm completely unhyped for it, but I did enjoy dancing with that corn farmer. So I'm going to buy it for £50. I'm going to play it because it's Yuji Naka. I'm going to play it because it's a 3D platformer. And for some reason, I've decided I will only be able to keep this genre alive if I buy all of them to prove that I still want them. But yeah, this is terrible. I can only hope this demo is... There's some severe work going on behind the scenes to figure out what the hell is happening here, because this was dreadful.
Yeah, I mean, I'd strongly hope so, but then I don't know. If it was different creators, I could see them taking that feedback on board. But again, this is basically a 3D. It reminds me of 3D Sonic games where sometimes they are just absolutely dreadful, and we still buy them for £50 and we play them. But we certainly don't recommend anyone else does. Like, I would not, based on this demo, I would just completely stress that nobody should buy this game. Don't follow my actions in me buying the game. Don't take that as a thing. Just you ignore it, and I will play it.
Just look forward to our review in it's out at the end of March, so in 2 months' time, where we both tell you it's the best 3D platformer we'd ever played because we didn't get the subtle meaning of the man who rages at the storm, and we needed the full experience to grasp it at last. I don't know. This was terrible, but yeah, I'm still gonna buy it.
Yeah, maybe we just need to play more levels with insane titles that aren't then about anything. Maybe the next one will be like the unholy destruction of the god of destiny, and then you play it and it's just like a trip to the supermarket or something. Maybe we just need more of that, and then we'll really be in the Balan Wonderworld world. But yeah, not a good sign, and yet also definitely download the demo if you are listening, because it's a unique train wreck that I think everyone should experience, to be fair. Anyway, right, moving on then, a couple of actual news stories after this. So we got a bit of news this week about Sony making some new patents for VR stuff, which is kind of interesting because they've completely abandoned the PSVR to a hilarious extent, to the point where it doesn't even plug in the PS5 unless you go to a specific website and ask them to send you an adapter. They've really completely abandoned it. And yet, yeah, they've made a new patent, which is basically for a system where one person's in VR and everyone else is on like their phones, and they can affect the game that the VR guy's playing from the phones and stuff, which it's a fun idea. It's an idea that definitely already exists, except for the only difference is this would be one man has a VR headset on. Like Sony have literally made games that are this, right? Where they're just normal PlayStation, like you hold a controller rather than a VR headset, but you make different decisions in stories based on people sat on phones. I'm sure this exists. So I don't know why it needed to be patented, but nonetheless, it shows some kind of indication that they might actually do another VR headset, which seems strange to me.
Yeah, I thought they were just going to let this die. I thought, there are people who have been asking for their adapter who have still not got one for the VR, to the point where I just assumed they thought nobody would call. The poor bastard man in the Kinect adapter headset, just the phone line there. It's just got nothing to do. Just no one will ever phone them. I just assumed it was a similar thing. Yeah. And yeah, I guess it's nice that they're going to try and continue doing something with it. It was as close to mass market as we got with this. It was probably had the biggest cut through just because it had the Sony name attached to it, and it had that good Astrobot game. Yeah. But I can't say I ever wanted one. I didn't end up buying one, and I won't probably buy this either. So that's
fair. I very much would. I think the PSVR was always a bit of a shame because, like you said, it did make the biggest kind of mainstream dent in terms of getting VR out there because it was fairly well priced. It had the Sony name on it, but also it was a woefully underpowered piece of kit. Like the resolutions on the screens aren't up to like. There's a certain minimum resolution you should have with VR so that it looks like actual VR. And the screens on these don't do that. So everything kind of looks like you're watching it through like a muddy window and stuff. It's got issues that I would love to see resolved in a PSVR 2. But at the same time, yeah, the fact that they dropped this so heavily. I've actually got the adapter to plug my PSVR into my PS5, and I don't do it because when I use the adapter, the full signal to my TV isn't the same, so I don't get my full 4K goodness through the wire anymore. So I'm not plugging my PSVR adapter in to have that happen. And then also, I don't know if you saw this, but there's a thing where basically PS5 games literally don't know what a PSVR is, to the point where some people have been playing Hitman 3 recently, and Hitman 3 has a PlayStation VR exclusive, mode where you can play the whole game in VR. Apparently, it's quite good, but to play that on PS5, you have to download the PS4 version of Hitman 3, because the PS5 version of Hitman 3 has no idea what a PSVR is because PS5 games fundamentally can't see it. So, to abandon something that hard and then keep going with a new model just seems pretty wild to me.
Seems pretty strange. I'm more concerned about this let spectators make choices thing, because obviously in my heart of hearts, I've just been waiting for Microsoft to announce the Kinect 3 for the Xbox Series consoles, because it's what we all want. And I was hoping for some, Kinectimals 2 Game Pass goodness, where maybe I could be sat there on my phone making a choice to whether little Susie's tiger eats the food or eats her. And I'm just hammering the eat her button. Just like, get mauled. Maul her. Just screaming into the phone.
Kinect 3 has like hologram text, so the tiger comes out of the screen. It's getting her. You're like, yeah, take that.
Take that. This is Twitch. That's what I wanted. So I'm a little bit worried this is luck behind Sony, who don't have licenses as powerful as Connectimals and Connect Sports and Russia, Disney, Pixar Adventure, where I could, have
all the heavy hitters, yeah.
All the heavy hitters where the Ratatouille rat could, bury into someone's skin and breed in there or whatever they do. I don't know. I wanted something sick, and it's not going to happen now, and I'm kind of sad.
That's fair. I mean, I think in fairness, this is it's a very fun idea. It could go a long way towards making a VR headset kind of more of a focal point of a social event. I could see people having a lot of fun with, if there's a horror game that comes out and, one person's got the headset on, absolutely crapping themselves, and everyone else is sat on the sofa kind of making him, giving him the hardest ways to go, or giving him really crap items to try and fight monsters off and stuff. I think it's a good idea, for a world where social events exist again. This could be very fun, actually. So yeah, we'll see how it goes.
We'll see how it goes, but it'll be no Connectimals 2 Maulem edition. That's what I know.
That is true. And yeah, so one final story this week. This is mainly so I can just be sad that I won't get to play it. But this week, a full playthrough is leaked online of a cancelled GoldenEye HD remake. So this game is basically complete. It's finished. It's been, just sat there doing nothing for ages now. And it would have basically been the Perfect Dark Xbox Live Arcade release, but for GoldenEye. So the original N64 title, all spruced up, control improvements, texture improvements. And yeah, the game's done, but they could never get the licensing to release it. So it's never going to come out. And that completely sucks. I am very much unhappy about that. And the guy who put the video up actually said that he might be finding a way to, get the files out there sometime this year. And there's a fair chance I might try and find a way to play that, because that's going to be cool.
I don't know what your problem is. They had that fantastic GoldenEye remake on the Wii. Well, what more do you want? It was like the N64 version, but better. Everybody loved that game, didn't they? I remember everybody loving that game. I remember parties. Everybody was getting the Wiimotes, doing a little GoldenEye shooting, going, God, it's just like the N64 days. All that good stuff.
Just like the original one. Look, here's Daniel Craig and GoldenEye for no apparent reason. Thanks for that. That's a good idea.
What a game that was. I don't know, man. I mean, I've played GoldenEye in recent years, and you need those nostalgia glasses. You need them glasses on pretty hard if you're gonna really get a lot of joy out of that now. But
I can see that, but I think I think like Perfect Dark before it, I think it's an interesting kind of product of its time. And GoldenEye was really the starting point of having that really clever kind of mission design where the higher difficulties have more objectives, and you've got to kind of go off the beaten path to do extra stuff. And yeah, it's not something where if it would have came out, it would need the people, it's the people who played it originally picking it up again that are going to get the most joy out of it. But that's kind of fine. I think it would have been, I would have greatly enjoyed playing through this again. And I mean, frankly, having a dual analog stick setup rather than a train wreck Nintendo 64 controller to play these things basically just makes them easy mode anyway, because you can just run rings around the computers at this point. So it would have been a nice, fun, breezy playthrough. But yeah, sadly not going to happen. It's just going to sit there.
To all that, I have to say, dry your eyes, mate, plug your Wii in, and play GoldenEye 007 on that, and shut up. That's what you're going to have to do, man.
Maybe I'll play some Perfect Dark Zero on Xbox 360 afterwards. All the highlights of those series. Well, then, on that slightly depressing note, that is the end of the news this week and the end of the show. So in the meantime, if you would like to follow us on social media, you can find us on Twitter at Beat the Sheet. We will be posting the next batch of games leaving Game Pass on there as soon as we know them, which should hopefully be very soon. Maybe it's already out now that you're listening. So check us out there if you want to hear about those as soon as possible. You can find us on email at beatthesheetpodcast@gmail.com. Feel free to email us anything you want, thoughts, feedback, questions. Always happy to hear from listeners on there. And if you want to find us on YouTube, we now have a YouTube channel as well. So we post this show up on YouTube as an audio show as well as the podcast. So if that's a more convenient place for you to listen, then by all means, follow us there. Okay, then. So until next time, I am Andy Wood, and I am now at 65% complete on the sheet. Just managed to claw up to 65 there, even though all the new Yakuza games that got added did nearly ruin me.
And my name is Josh Stevenson, and I remain on 53%, but only by 0.06 of a percentage point. But Andrew, being the Fuhrer that he is, will not allow me to call it 54%. So 53 I stay on. Maybe I'll be up by next week.
I mean, to be fair, you took great joy in pushing me down to 64 again this week. Luckily I've beat a few games at the end of the week to get back up, but you were very happy to inform me, I've added the new games and it's dropped you down to 64. I was like, yeah, thanks for that. All right then, thanks a lot for listening, everybody, and we will catch you next week.
Goodbye.